Sincere thanks to all of you for coming to Pillowtime Whispers, a channel for ghost stories featuring the most captivating and haunting tales. Today, we'll delve into some small ghost stories from Saigon. Why small ghost stories? Because they're short and concise, yet they recount real spiritual experiences in the vibrant land of Saigon. The third story, perhaps, is something you've noticed these past few days. There's been a guy live streaming on TikTok from a rented room where someone had taken their life. He even used the deceased person's toothbrush. Pretty disturbing. This story is somewhat similar, but it's about a guy who lived in such a room, not just for 1 or 2 nights, but for 3 whole weeks. What ghostly things happened there? Let's find out as we share these small ghost stories from Saigon. To be honest with everyone, I have a peculiar mindset about spiritual encounters. If I experience something firsthand, I'll believe it, though some of my friends like to tease, saying it's just hallucinations from too much partying. I usually just stay quiet and let people believe what they want. But when others tell me their ghost stories, I don't usually believe them. Strange, isn't it? Back in high school, I had a Chinese-Vietnamese friend. Though I'm also Chinese-Vietnamese, we hailed from different regions. Once, he told me a spiritual story that happened in his home. His grandparents had passed away, and during the 49-day mourning period, the house was covered with white cloth to cover reflective surfaces like mirrors or anything made of glass. Those who've experienced funerals in their families might know about this custom. His house was in District 5 on Pham Hue Tri Street, and his grandmother's altar was on the 3rd floor. Incense smoke often filled the air, and at night, they'd turn on a red altar light. Looking at it from the outside, the house had a very eerie vibe. One day, his dad went up to clean the altar like he always did. As soon as he stepped onto the 3rd floor, he froze. Smoke filled the room. When he rushed to check, he saw that the incense sticks in the burner had caught fire, even though they hadn't been lit since the previous evening. He quickly grabbed the altar cloth to extinguish the flames. Afterward, he replaced the burnt incense holder with a new one, but didn't tell anyone about the incident. Things seemed normal for a while until one night, when my friend was home alone watching TV. He suddenly heard his black dog barking uncontrollably near his grandmother's bedroom door. Annoyed, he yelled at the dog, but it wouldn't stop. When he got up to check, he saw the dog wagging its tail excitedly in front of the door. That was odd because the room was supposed to be locked since his grandmother passed. The door should only have been opened when his mom went in to clean during the day. Thinking his parents might have forgotten to lock it, he went to shoo the dog away. But as he pushed the door to close it, he saw a shadow pass by inside. Curiosity got the better of him, so he peeked inside. Faint light from the hallway illuminated the room, and on the bed, he saw someone lying there, fully covered in a blanket. He even heard faint breathing. Terrified, he ran out of the house and stayed with the tofu vendor across the street until his parents came home. When he told them what he saw, they simply smiled and changed the subject. My friend swore this was a real experience, but as for me, I listened for fun and didn't believe it. Back then, my grandmother was still young, barely over 20 years old, and hadn't even experienced love yet. This story was told by my grandmother to our family, and later my mother shared it with me. The story begins when my grandmother was close friends with a woman named Hugh. Their houses were separated by a canal in the village of Tan Toi Hoa, under Jung Hoa Thuong district in Go Vap, Gia Dinh province, Old Saigon. Before this event, my grandmother was known to be brave. Though not completely fearless when it came to ghosts, she wasn't one to scream or panic like most girls. She recalled an incident in the village when a man fell into the canal and drowned after drinking too much. This man, known to everyone because it was a small community, often passed by my grandmother's house. When his funeral procession passed her home on its way to the cemetery, no one thought much of it. One evening, while helping her mother sort beans in the yard, she heard a man's drunken singing getting closer and closer. Curious, she turned to look and saw a man staggering in front of her house. She assumed it was just someone from the village returning home after a drink, and paid no mind until she heard him call out, "Hey, Ba! Why don't you greet me? So rude." Her nickname was Ba, and everyone called her that. Irritated, my grandmother got up to confront him but froze in her tracks. It was the drowned man. His face was pale green, his body soaking wet with water dripping onto the ground. His long hair clung to his scalp, and his eyes were pitch black. Terrified, she couldn't utter a word. The man grinned, waved for her to follow him, and began to walk away. Just then, her mother called her from inside the house. The man disappeared, gliding away without visible feet. The next day, my grandmother and her family prepared offerings by the canal to appease his spirit, and from that point on, she never saw him again. One time, she and Hugh decided to attend a Kai Luong, a traditional Vietnamese opera, performance at a local pagoda. After the show ended around 11 p.m., they hurried home, taking a path by the canal. It was dark, and they barely noticed a bamboo grove lying across the trail. Hugh ran ahead, but as she stepped onto the bamboo, it suddenly stood upright, flinging her into the air before she crashed to the ground unconscious. Terrified, my grandmother screamed, alerting others returning from the performance. They rushed to help, carrying Hugh home. Later, the villagers explained that the bamboo grove was haunted by a spirit that had been there for generations. My grandmother, who had often walked past that area without incident, was deeply shaken. Although Hugh survived, she was paralyzed for life. My grandmother blamed herself, thinking that if she hadn't invited Hugh to the opera, none of it would have happened. Even though Hugh's parents didn't hold any grudges, my grandmother remained haunted by guilt until her death. Years later, a neighbor claimed to have seen Hugh's ghost in the yard, bowing and gesturing as if praying. My grandmother, though skeptical at first, became convinced when she witnessed strange occurrences herself. One night, while staying at Hugh's house, she awoke to find Hugh, who had been paralyzed, standing in the backyard, clapping her hands in a ritualistic manner. When my grandmother called out, Hugh turned, revealing a face as black as coal and glowing white eyes. Hugh then moved toward her, stiff and unnatural, as if controlled by an invisible force. Terrified, my grandmother fled the house, screaming for help. Villagers followed Hugh as she walked toward the haunted bamboo grove. When they found her, she was lifeless, her eyes wide open in terror. At Hugh's funeral, a Buddhist monk revealed that the spirit haunting the grove was once a wealthy man accused of sheltering rebels. He had been executed there over a century ago and had claimed Hugh's life at a predestined time. This chilling tale is one of the many my grandmother shared before her passing. Though I try to rationalize them, hearing these stories always sends shivers down my spine. What do you think about these experiences? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our horror channel for more spine-tingling tales.